I would now like to introduce our first speaker that's with us. The first speaker will be Dave Jones. He has been an electricity analyst for 20 years and is currently working at Ember, an independent research organization that aims to accelerate the global electricity transition from coal to clean energy. He was also the lead author of their Global Electricity Review. In the past, he has worked, I think, for more than 10 years as an electricity market analyst at E.ON, one of the world's largest power utilities. And today, he will give us an insight into the state of electricity transition in Europe and globally. So please, Dave, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katja. So we at Ember, back in August, we released a half-year update of the global electricity market so far this year, and then we did a European version. We've done some analysis of countries' national energy climate plans, and I kind of want to pull that all together a little bit to kind of discuss where we are today and where we're on track to for the next 10 years. So if I just share my screen, hopefully this will work okay. Voila. Does that look okay? Hopefully you can see the slides.
Yeah.
Cool. So I wanted to start off just with a kind of most basic slide, I guess, just to show where we are with wind and solar globally. So I have a couple of analysts working with me, and the team basically are constantly tracking electricity generation in countries across the world. So in the first half of this year, we look back and we reflected, and you can see how much wind and solar is already part of the electricity mix in a lot of countries. So you can see from this map that Europe's leading the charge. The UK is up to 33%, Germany's up to 42% of its electricity just from wind and solar. But the whole of the world is on a similar path. And when you look at other key countries, globally, we hit 1/10 the generation in the first half of this year from wind and solar, and globally, actually a lot of key countries are at the same level. So you've got the States about 12%, Brazil at 10%, Turkey at 13%, India at 10%, China at 10%, Japan at 10%. So everyone's kind of on this trajectory so far. And if we go on to the next slide, we can see just how quickly that's risen. So back in 2015, when the Paris Climate Agreement was signed, wind and solar were 5% of the electricity mix, and just in that 5 years, you can see wind and solar accelerating to up to 10% of the electricity mix. And you can actually see quite a few of those key countries following a similar pattern. You can see China, India, Japan, Brazil, all around 4, 5, 6% back in 2015, and then having doubled the level since then. You've got European Union basically at twice the level, so we were at 13% already by 2015, and as of the first half of this year, 21% of our electricity across the 27 countries came from wind or solar. So I guess I just wanted to start with this to show that that there are many places that are kind of left out across this world. You've got I've got a few other countries on here that obviously that don't look quite as good. So you've got South Korea that have been lagging behind. South Korea now pushing through a coal phase out of their own through Parliament. They're looking at signing off a net zero pathway themselves. You've got Vietnam on there that's kind of playing catch up in all of this. So Vietnam had the highest rate of solar growth last year, installing a huge amounts of solar, which is pulling up their electricity mix, their clean electricity mix. And when you look across the world, there's only one key country that kind of stands out as not having any wind or solar, which is Russia. So really, with very few exceptions, the whole of the world is on this path. And what I'm interested in is how quickly coal emissions can collapse across the world. When you add coal onto here, it's showing that that wind and solar is replacing coal in the electricity mix. So, so in the top left is the world electricity mix. And if you drew a line back for half a century before that, actually the electricity mix of coal is about 38%. It's been almost changed for half a century, and it's only in that last few years that you've seen coal come down as wind and solar have stepped in, and that's not some kind of convenient kind of fudging of statistics. Whatever country you look in, across a lot of the key countries, is the same pattern. That fall in coal is coming from that increase in wind and solar. We're here to talk about nuclear. I'm not really going to talk about nuclear too much at all, but there is one thing that I want to mention, which is when you look back, and we look back on the electricity mix in the first half of this year, obviously year on year, that solar part is growing. And year on year, the nuclear part it isn't growing. I'll come to the reason why that fell year on year in a minute. But what it means is that where we say that wind and solar was 1/10 of global generation in the first half of this year, well, actually, nuclear was only slightly higher than that. Most likely, the headline as we go into next year is going to be that wind and solar, for the first time in history, will be generating more than all the nuclear power plants across the world combined. So that's the level that wind and solar have now reached within the global electricity mix, and how quickly they're growing. So I wanted to pull back a little bit now to the EU picture. So there's a couple of cool records or cool things that have been happening in Europe's electricity mix. So in 2019, for the first time, wind and solar in Europe overtook coal. And you can see that this is caused by wind and solar rising, coal falling. It's cause and effect. You split it across countries, split it across hours, you can see the same pattern. And in total, if you add renewables in total and fossil fuel in total, so add the gas and oil into the coal electricity mix for renewables, add in biomass and add in hydro, and you can see in the first half of this year that for the first time renewables across the whole of the EU has overtaken fossil fuel generation, which is quite a landmark in the electricity transition that Europe's under at the moment. Just a little bit around where we are with COVID. This is month-on-month changes in electricity demand. There were some very large falls March into April across the EU, across most countries. And now when you analyse it by country for the latest data in August, most of those falls have come back to where we were again. So when we look at some metrics coming out of COVID, like airplane use is still down, and obviously all sorts of other metrics don't look as good. On the electricity side, most of that has put us back to where we are on that. So when we're thinking about the electricity transition, there is a little bit of a small hole from what's happened through COVID, but actually it in large part back to where we started from year on year. And there is one other, I said I wasn't going to talk about nuclear, there is one other slide I wanted to put down, which is that one of the big changes in the electricity mix so far this year in Europe is actually the fall in nuclear production. So so far the EDF in France is really struggling with their French plants. So when COVID struck, they took a lot of plants off on outage for extended maintenance periods, and they're kind of struggling with those maintenance periods to bring them back online again. And there's not too much more that I can kind of know or go into that, but I just wanted to highlight that as an issue that's still ongoing at the moment. So what does this mean within Europe? It means that with that wind and solar, we're setting new and bigger and bigger records. So you can see just the kind of year-on-year increases of wind and solar in the electricity mix. Denmark is leading the charge, which perhaps won't surprise you too much. Ireland is next up. Ireland's done an amazing job of rolling out wind generation and now have almost half of their electricity coming mostly from wind generation. And you can see most countries are on that path and all going in the right direction. What does this mean for coal? So this is, like I say, this has had a kind of a real big cause effect on coal. And you can see here's the monthly generation patterns, which is quite interesting to see just how dominated it is by Poland and Germany's generation. But what you can also see in the remaining 25 countries, that coal generation has really been collapsing, not just because of COVID, it's been structurally collapsing before that. And we'll come on to some of the reasons why in a minute, but it's interesting to see now that just that collapse in German generation so far this year, and it's collapsed to such a level that it's now below Poland. So actually Poland's overtaken Germany now as the biggest coal generator in Europe. So here are the individual countries all lined up with the amount of coal in there. So obviously there's some coal in Slovenia, as the rest of, as kind of, I guess, the countries that want to phase out coal, it's collapsing so quickly there. So if we look at Italy, Netherlands, and right on the right-hand side, Portugal, there's some countries that have had some huge collapses so far in coal generation as they go, as they've made pledges to phase out coal. So now when you line them up and say who are the biggest coal generators across Europe, you're number 3, you're on Czech Republic, number 4, you're on Bulgaria. And those countries have much less of a plan right at this point in time on how to phase out coal. And it'd be interesting to see how those plans develop over the coming years, especially with the coal commission that's happening within the Czech Republic at the moment. So I put this chart up. It's slightly out of date. I'm trying to think of the exact changes that have happened since. So, but it does a very good job of just showing the timeline of coal phase out announcements that have happened across Europe. So back in 2015, the UK was the first country that pledged to phase out coal by 2025. And then in 2016, it started becoming a bit of a thing. Other countries jumping on that wagon. And as of now, there's now a further 14 countries that have announced that they'll phase out coal generation. And I guess carrying on for that, if we just look at, this is one of the most terrible graphs I've produced, but what it shows is it shows the European Commission impact analysis of what happens to be able to achieve 55% climate ambition by 2030. And within their analysis, they put the amount of coal that needs to be burnt to restrict to 55%. And what it shows is that the amount of coal is really on a par with the amount of non-power coal that we have tomorrow. We know that the amount of non-power coal will fall much less than coal power plants, because for steel, for cement, those pathways will take a little longer. What that means is that when the Commission at the moment is thinking about coal about 55%. Ambition levels, and that's going through Parliament at the moment, it is to a large extent, according to their modelling, needing a coal phase out to be able to get there. And what we did at Ember, we went through each of the national energy climate plans in every country and tried to unpick them for what it meant for coal, but also what it meant for wind and solar. And actually, the wind and solar slide was even more interesting. You can see the real extent of transition that's going to be happening in the next decade in so many countries. So these black dots here are the wind and solar and the electricity mix in 2018. And the red dots are, according to the National Energy and Climate Plans, what that electricity mix will be by 2030. So you can see within Denmark is going up to be powered almost exclusively by wind and solar just in the next 10 years. Netherlands is interesting because it actually shows the biggest increase. So you can see in 2018, Netherlands has been a little bit behind on the bandwagon for wind and solar, but what it's been lagging behind on is making up with spades. So it's actually planning to replace 60% of its whole electricity supply from wind and solar in the next over that 12 years, to raise it from 10% of the mix to 70% of the mix. So I hope that gives some kind of like levels of some kind of idea about some of the levels of ambition that are happening across Europe at the moment. And I just wanted to end on a final slide, which is very timely. It came out this morning from the IEA World Energy Outlook. And for the first time, the IEA in their World Energy Outlook have added an ambitious scenario that's consistent with a net zero 2050 net zero target, which is really cool. And when you look at it, and what it means for coal, it means that globally we need to phase out all the inefficient subcritical units by 2030 to be able to reach that. So within the bubble for how you can be on that 2050 pathway for net zero, there's just no room for inefficient coal within that. And this line, which shows coal generation collapsing by 80% from last year, from 2019 to 2030. So global coal generation collapsing by 80% in just over a decade. That's consistent with what the IPCC say on their 1.5 degree scenario. So it's very nice to actually have the World Energy Outlook, the IEA, to come out with this, to be able to show what needs to happen to put us on that pathway. It's going to be one heck of a challenge to get there and to see coal phase out that quickly. But certainly we hope that will happen, and if it does happen, we believe it will happen because of that enormous pickup in wind and solar that's going on across the world right now. Thank you very much.